Hey, before we get into some of the more practical issues, I want to continue with a discussion of the questions. And the next question that I want to address is it fair or just to all the stakeholders? That is, if you are contemplating some sort of action, is it fair? Now, you hear a lot of talk about fairness these days. And I want to reduce that to the question who deserves what? And in the context of business ethics, if you talk about economic justice, it's the question of how should the goods and the burdens of the world be distributed? Who should get what and on what grounds? Okay. Now, fairness and justice basically is always considered giving everyone his or her due. Right? Now, that's easy. We just start out and say, okay, just give everybody what they should get. But that doesn't tell us much. Right? But what I want to do is apply a basic principle here. And we said ethics has to do with being reasonable. And so I want to apply the principle, the rational principle of the same should be treated the same. And we talked about this before. If A is exactly like B, and this is good for A, then this will be good for B, won't it? Makes sense. Okay. So if this person is like that person, okay, then this person should be treated like that person. Unless there's a relevant difference. And that's the problem of moral equivalence, and that's how we get into a whole lot of arguments and discussions and that sort of stuff. Okay? All right, now that gets us part of the way. So if these two people are the equivalent or alike, then they ought to be treated the same. Except we still haven't decided on what basis, right, are we going to distribute any kinds of goods or something like that. Now, I want to come up with a problem for you. Suppose, just suppose, fancifully, all right, there are 20 of us, 20 of you in the class, and suppose that some angel descended and gave me $200,000 and said, okay, Professor Duska, your job is to fairly distribute the $200,000 to your students in your St. Joe's class. Now, how should I give that out? And when you think about it, and maybe we'll talk about this in class, but when you think about it, there's three possible ways. And generally what happens is people will say, well, $200,000, there's 20 of us, give us each $10,000 apiece. That's equally. All right? It's equal. Of course, some of you might have a whole lot of money and not need the $20,000, whereas, giving $20,000 out would really, really help somebody get out of bind. All right? In that case, then, what you're doing is saying, okay, well, maybe we don't want to give it out equally. Maybe to contribute to more overall happiness, that's the kind of utilitarian principle, right? Maybe to contribute to more overall happiness, we should give it out to those in need. All right? So that's the second way. You can give out equally, you can give it out according to need. On the other hand, suppose I wanted to really motivate you, right, to do work in this course, and I decided, okay, I'm not going to give it out according to need, nor am I going to give it out equally. I'm going to give it out on the basis of who contributes the most to the class, and let's say who writes the best papers for the class. In that case, let's suppose we give $100,000 first prize, $30,000 second prize, And, oh no, excuse me, we had 200,000. So we'll give $100,000 first prize, $50,000 second prize, and I'll be really nice and give two third and a third and a fourth place prize, each worth $25,000. Now that would be according to merit. Now, the truth of the matter is those are the general ways of distributing wealth, and in certain circumstances, one outweighs the other. In the markets, it's basically given out according to merit. Of course, people have trouble with the capitalist system, and so they say, no, 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 we need also to give out according to need, so the government steps in. We don't want just rampageous markets going on. At any rate, so if you're going to address the question, who should get what, you've got to take a look at those three criteria and see when it's best to apply which one. Now, that's the question of distributive justice. And we'll be taking a look at, or you can take a look at in ethics, some situations like affirmative action, preferential hiring, and that sort of stuff. There's another kind of justice I want to quickly talk about, though, and that's the question of compensatory justice. Who should get what? And that's a fairly easy one. That's an easier one. You know, if you look at compensatory justice, it basically says, if you break my window, you should fix it. We used to play ball in the street, break the neighbor's window, and our fathers would say, okay, you go fix what you broke. And that's what's behind torts. And it's what's behind liability and a whole lot of other stuff. If you put somebody behind economically, you've got an obligation to make them better. All right, so you got these two kinds of justice, and you want to look at them when you are trying to sort out particular kinds of issues in business ethics. Let's go back, though, okay? Distributive justice. And one of the things you got we should remark on is when you've got capitalism over against communism, everybody's familiar with the Marxist principle, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. So give what you can to the society, and then we will redistribute it and give it out according to need, to which those who work really hard say, well, why? And then you've got stories like the ant and the grasshopper, and the grasshopper kind of hung around, didn't do anything all summer, and the ants worked really diligently, and then winter came, and there wasn't enough food for the grasshopper, and he went knocking on the anthill and said, give me some, and the ant said, well, what did you do for it? Okay. So that question of who deserves what has been around for a long, long, long time, particularly since it showed up in the fable of Aesop. And it's going to show up over and over again when we are critiquing or looking at or evaluating the capitalist system, and when we are evaluating other people's work and compensation schemes and all that sort of stuff. Okay, that then is the question of justice. We'll be talking about that, and I hope you've read the article, Who Deserves What? Okay, so much for that question. We'll move on to another one shortly.